The loud music made the floor vibrate, colorful lights flashed and spread over the unknown faces that laughed, danced and surrendered to the moment. But none of that mattered. My eyes were fixed on a single point, paralyzed, as if my body had lost the ability to move. There she was. Not alone. Not with friends. Not enjoying the night like I so often said I would. She was accompanied. Sitting at the table, next to a man who wasn't me. Her face shone in the room light, her lips moved in a smile I hadn't seen in a while. The fingers, once so firm holding my hand, now slid down his arm. And when her eyes met mine, there was no surprise, just a brief moment of hesitation. As if, for a second, the world had stopped. And then I said, without hesitation, without shouting, without any apparent emotion, "It's over between us. I want a divorce right now." The words came out before I could think. Before the poison of betrayal burned my throat and prevented me from speaking. Her eyes widened, the man next to her frowned. The noise of the party seemed distant, as if everything around them had gone silent. Just the three of us at that moment. She blinked a few times, opened her mouth, but couldn't say anything right away. My chest rose and fell, my mind struggled with the reality of what I saw. The woman who slept next to me every night, who held my hand through difficulties, who promised eternal love in front of so many, now looked at me as if I were a stranger, as if I were a problem to be solved. "It's not what you think," she finally said, her voice shaking, and the man next to her shifted uncomfortably in his chair. But my laugh was bitter, filled with something that even I couldn't explain. "Isn't that what I'm thinking? So what is it? What does this ringtone mean? That look? This approach that I already suspected, but never wanted to believe?" The bitter taste rose to his mouth. I swallowed hard. How long? How long was I made a fool of, while she was getting dressed to go out with him, while she was making excuses, while she was kissing me before leaving the house? The man, perhaps feeling the weight of what was unfolding, stood up. "I think I'd better go," he said, but I stopped him with a sharp look. "No. You stay. You watch what you helped destroy." She looked at me, alarmed, and tried to grab my hand, but I pulled her away. Too late. Love had broken in that instant. And what was left there, in front of that table, in front of those faces, was just an absurd pain, an uncontrollable anger and the certainty that things would never be the same again. I left the party without looking back. The sound of my footsteps echoed in my head. The night air felt heavy, the world around me seemed to have lost its colors. And as I walked away from that place, a thought persisted: she had chosen another one. And I, of all people, was the last to know. The next day, the house was silent. Empty. Her scent still hung in the air. The photos on the walls seemed to mock me. Our fake smiles, the moments that now felt like lies. I took one of them. A trip a few years ago. I held her hand, and she looked at me as if I were everything to her. But what now? Now I was just an obstacle in her way. The cell phone vibrated. Messages from her. Missed calls. A pathetic attempt to explain the inexplicable. But I didn't need any more empty words. I wanted justice. I wanted her to feel the pain I was feeling. I wanted her to regret every second of the steps she took, the kisses she exchanged, the lies she told. And then I decided. I decided that she would learn the cruelest way. Because betrayal cannot be paid with tears. It pays with consequences. But fate has a funny way of dealing with traitors. She thought she could have it all. She thought the man she threw away a marriage for would be there for her. But what she didn't know, what she would never imagine, is that he never wanted anything more than a passing game. He never loved her. And when she was alone, when she realized that she had lost everything for a love that wasn't real, it was too late. I often wondered if I would take pleasure in seeing her suffer. But the truth is, when I saw it fall apart, I understood that there was nothing left there. Just emptiness. Just the certainty that what was destroyed could never be rebuilt. What was left now? Maybe a fresh start. But before that, I needed to watch her fall apart. I needed to see the betrayal take its toll. I needed to make sure she never forgot the night she lost me. And when the truth finally came out, when she realized she had been used and discarded, when her pain finally reflected mine, I understood that fate had served her justice. But was that enough? Welcome to the channel. Here, betrayal will never be romanticized or justified. Our stories are fictional, but the lesson is real: betrayal destroys homes, hearts and lives. Each narrative exposes the devastating consequences of disloyalty, showing that nothing goes unpunished. Get ready for a shocking, intense story full of twists and turns. Take a deep breath, because what comes next will shake you. The night was calm, the gentle breeze passed through the half-open windows, bringing with it the subtle aroma of the garden's flowers. In the spacious and elegantly decorated living room, Ethan leaned back on the sofa, eyes fixed on the television screen, but not actually watching anything. Silence filled the space around him, a type of silence that only those who had been in a long-term relationship could recognize. It wasn't the comfort of tranquility, but the absence of something that had once been there. Olivia was in the kitchen, stirring something on the counter, her movements precise and meticulous, as always. The sound of the wine running into the glass was the only thing that broke the stillness. She took the glass to her lips without haste, glancing at her husband. Ethan didn't understand her look, or if he did, he chose to ignore it. Between them, there was an abyss that had formed so gradually that neither of them could pinpoint exactly the moment when everything began to change. Years ago, nights were different. There was laughter echoing through the house, unhurried conversations about any banal subject, hands that spontaneously reached for each other. But, over time, the touches became rarer, the looks less loaded with meaning in the words, more measured. Maybe it was the weight of commitments, of daily responsibilities, of the predictability that comes with stability. Or maybe it was just tiredness, that subtle tiredness that creeps between two people and makes the effort to keep the flame burning seem like an unnecessary burden. Ethan was always a methodical, practical man who believed that love didn't need constant proof, just presence. He was there, wasn't he? Every day, at the same time, in the same place. He kept his promises, made sure nothing was missing, held the line when Olivia needed it. But was that enough? Olivia sighed softly, taking another sip of her wine, watching the scene in front of her as if she were a spectator of her own life. She remembered how it all started, how her heart raced at his simple touch, the urgency that existed between the two. Time had transformed this urgency into something warm, something too comfortable to be challenging, but too distant to be truly welcoming. She didn't know if Ethan felt the same way. In fact, he seemed to be too comfortable in that bubble, unable to see the cracks forming around them. Or maybe he saw it, but chose to ignore it. He was never a man of grand words or impulsive gestures. It was always solid, predictable, a safe haven. And for many years, Olivia believed that was what she wanted. Until he began to wonder if love, in fact, could survive only in stability. The routine was relentless. In the morning, Ethan would leave early for work, as he always did, leaving behind the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Olivia stayed behind, organizing the house, taking care of details that he didn't even notice. Afterwards, the hours dragged on between social commitments, the gym, casual meetings with friends, all filling the void that, for some time, she had been unable to ignore. At the beginning of their marriage, she liked the predictability, the certainty that Ethan would come home every day, that there would never be any big surprises, that her life would follow a steady, smooth course. But what once felt like security now felt suffocating. And she didn't know exactly when this change happened. Maybe it was little by little, small accumulated disappointments, moments when I expected a different look, a longer touch, a word of affection that never came. Ethan, in turn, also noticed the changes, but didn't know how to react to them. For him, love was something that was built over time, through coexistence, with the little things of everyday life. He was never the type of man to make passionate declarations or surprise with unexpected gestures. His love was always there, present in the details, in the way he solved problems without her having to ask, in the way he covered her at night when he saw her curled up in bed, in the bills paid without delay, in the stability he provided. But was that enough? He didn't know. I just knew that over the last few months something felt out of place. Olivia seemed more distant, more distracted. Her eyes, once bright and attentive, now wandered, as if they were always somewhere else. But he never asked what was going on. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to deal with it. Maybe, deep down, I was afraid of the answer. The house that was once full of life was now just a static scene, where two people occupied different spaces, following their routines without actually meeting. Ethan worked late, Olivia filled her days with activities he never asked what they were. The conversations were limited to the essentials, dinner, the bills, the week's commitments. But neither of them talked about what really mattered. About what was going on inside them. About what was changing. The days went on like this, until small changes began to emerge. Olivia started getting ready to go out more, she started receiving messages on her cell phone more frequently, she started smiling at something that Ethan couldn't see. He noticed, of course he noticed. But I preferred not to ask. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe it was just a reflection of the distance that had grown between them. And maybe, just maybe, he knew that deep down, the answer was already there, waiting to be discovered. The days repeated themselves in a meticulously structured routine, but something had changed. Ethan felt it in the air, in the way Olivia smiled differently, in the increasingly prolonged absence of her presence next to him. She always had an active social life, friends with whom she went out for coffee and occasional meetings, but lately the excuses came more frequently, the schedules were increasingly different from what they used to be. When she returned home, she brought with her a perfume that was not hers, a subtle, almost imperceptible smell, but one that seemed to invade the room insistently. He didn't ask anything. I watched. He tried to convince himself that it was just an impression, that his mind was creating unfounded paranoia. But the silence between them screamed, and the lack of answers weighed like lead. One night, sitting in bed while Olivia was in the shower, Ethan picked up his cell phone and stared at the dark screen. He felt a weight in his chest. He had never been the type to spy, he had never suspected anything before. But the feeling that something was being hidden began to eat away at his patience. He started to notice more, paying attention to the small details. The way Olivia spent more time on the phone, how she always typed with a half smile, distracted, as if she were in a world he didn't have access to. Departures that were previously justified with casual explanations were now followed by pauses and hesitations. Something wasn't right. The night everything started to fall apart came unexpectedly. Olivia had gone out to an event that, according to her, was a meeting between friends. She dressed differently than she was used to, more carefully, more detailed. Ethan noticed but didn't comment. He just watched, as he had been doing lately. The hour progressed, and the message he expected did not arrive. Olivia would usually send something, even if it was a brief justification for a delay. But that night, nothing. The clock was almost midnight when he took out his cell phone and opened the conversation with her. No updates. No sign that she was worried about staying in touch. Unrest began to spread within him, turning into something he could no longer ignore. He took the car keys and left. The city was still alive, lights flashing in the busy streets, groups of people gathering in bars and restaurants. He drove aimlessly for a few minutes, his mind torn between uncertainty and fear of what he might find. It was then that he saw her. From afar, through the restaurant's large windows, he recognized her silhouette. But she wasn't with her friends. Her laughter filled the space between her and a man sitting across from her, a laugh Ethan hadn't heard in a long time. Her gaze, which had previously seemed empty inside the house, now shone with something he didn't want to name. The way her hand rested on the table, so close to his, the casual touches, the gestures that previously belonged only to him. Ethan's heart raced, his chest tightened painfully. There were no more doubts. The betrayal was there, clear, explicit, before his eyes. It wasn't a paranoid daydream, it wasn't a misinterpretation. It was real. He remained outside, unable to enter, unable to look away. Olivia smiled differently, bowed slightly, as if savoring every word exchanged. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a slip-up. It was choice. A choice she made every time she left home, every time she hid messages, every time she came back to him carrying the scent of someone else. The air felt too heavy to breathe, vision blurred by his jaw locked in suppressed fury. He didn't know how long he stood there, just taking in the scene. But then, without hesitating any longer, he entered. The room was full, voices mixing in happy conversations, but for Ethan, everything was silent. Olivia noticed his presence too late. Her smile died the instant her eyes met his. There was a moment of pause, a moment when no one seemed to know what to do. The man beside her glanced at Ethan, as if realizing for the first time that this encounter had witnesses. Olivia opened her mouth, but he stepped forward, his voice firm, without hesitation, leaving no room for excuses. It's over between us. I want a divorce right now. The silence around them felt heavy, as if every person in that restaurant could feel the tension that had just arisen. Olivia blinked, her face turning pale. The man next to her shifted in his chair, looking uncomfortable, as if he had been caught in a situation he had no intention of dealing with. Ethan kept his gaze fixed on her, waiting for something, anything. But she didn't say anything. There was no denial, there was no surprise. Just the silence of someone who knew they had been caught. And in that moment, he knew the worst was yet to come. The silence between them was unbearable. Olivia looked at Ethan as if she was expecting something, an explanation, an attack, maybe even a flash of compassion. But he just stared at her, steady, his eyes carrying a cold fury, a hurt so deep it was impossible to measure. The restaurant seemed to have become another world, a universe away from where they were now. She swallowed hard, fidgeting nervously with her fingers on the table. The man next to her didn't even try to intervene. He knew. I knew there was nothing that could be said to soften what had been done. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling his breath heavy in his chest, a feeling of suffocation growing. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words took a long time to come out, as if his tongue refused to verbalize everything that was swirling inside him. How long? The voice was slurred, filled with something that mixed contempt and contained pain. Olivia hesitated. His gaze faltered, sliding to the tablecloth, as if the answer was hidden there. But there was no escape. Ethan wouldn't look away. I would not accept lies or omissions. Not this time. I don't know. Her voice sounded small, fragile, but not enough to wake him from his state of vigilance. He laughed, a short laugh, humorless, just filled with incredulity. Don't you know? What does that mean, Olivia? That it happened so many times that you can't remember? That you lost count of how many times you lied to me before you left the house? The intensity in Ethan's voice made her step back slightly, her shoulders shrugging as if seeking protection. But there was no protection there. No more. It wasn't like that. She tried to argue, but her words no longer had any weight, they had no value. Ethan clenched his hands into fists at his sides. There was so much to be said, so much to be shouted. But nothing would help. Nothing would erase what was done. He felt his chest burn, an emptiness spreading inside him, consuming any trace of the person he had been before that night. I trusted you. I asked myself so many times if I was paranoid, if I was seeing things that didn't exist, if the problem was mine. But no. You chose this. You chose to deceive me, you chose to live a lie. And now you look at me as if I were the victim of this situation. The words came out sharp, sharp as blades, and Olivia closed her eyes, as if they were physically hurting her. But it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. Ethan turned to leave, but something in her expression made him stop. It wasn't just guilt or regret. It was fear. A genuine fear, a fear that went beyond the shame of being caught. He frowned, his breathing still ragged. Something was wrong. More than he could see at that moment. There's something else, isn't there? The question came before he could ponder it. Olivia tensed. The man next to her straightened in his chair, looking away. Ethan focused on her, waiting. He knew when she was hiding something. I always knew. I didn't want it to be like this. Her voice shook, and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. But that didn't move him. He wanted the truth. All of her. Then speak. Now. He demanded, and Olivia shuddered, swallowing hard. The terror in her eyes grew. The man next to her cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps it would be better to talk in private. Ethan shot him a withering look. You've already stolen everything from me. Now shut up and listen. Olivia trembled, brought her hands to her face for a moment, then exhaled sharply. Her eyes met his, and then she said something that made his world completely fall apart. He never wanted to be with me. The words seemed disconnected, confused, but Ethan said nothing. He just waited. Olivia closed her eyes for a second before continuing. I was discarded. Her voice trailed off on the last word, and a dense silence fell between them. Ethan blinked, not completely understanding. But then, slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. The man next to her looked away, as if he wanted to be anywhere else. Olivia looked like she was about to fall apart. Ethan felt something dark well up inside him. You threw our marriage away, for someone who doesn't want you. His tone was pure contempt, but also shock. Olivia bit her lip, a sob catching in her throat. I thought he loved me. But he never wanted anything serious. I was stupid. He doesn't want commitment. He never did. Ethan felt his body go cold. He didn't know what he expected to hear, but it definitely wasn't that. He leaned forward, staring at her intently. You destroyed everything for an illusion. She nodded, her face sinking into her hands. But Ethan didn't feel sorry. There was no room for that. He felt disgusted. Disgust at the situation, disgust at the way she looked at him now, as if she were asking for help, as if she expected understanding. But he was no longer the man who always forgave her. Not this time. So now you're alone. He said, walking away. Olivia sobbed, but didn't try to hold him back. She knew. I knew that any attempt to fix the irreparable was futile. She had made her choice. And now, he would pay for it. Ethan left the restaurant without looking back. His body was rigid, his steps were quick, his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. The cold night wind hit his face, but it didn't calm him down. His chest rose and fell heavily, as if there wasn't enough air to fill his lungs. The anger inside him wasn't just for what Olivia had done, but for the absurdity of it all. She betrayed him, lied, deceived, and for what? To be discarded as if it were worthless? To throw an entire marriage in the trash for someone who didn't even care about her? The thought made his stomach turn. He crossed the street almost without noticing, got into the car and started the engine, but didn't drive. He just stood there, his hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. His mind was racing, trying to process everything at once. There was no justification for what she did. None. But knowing that she not only betrayed him, but was also deceived, made him feel even greater revolt. Because, in the end, Olivia was as pathetic as she was cruel. The message on the cell phone vibrated on the car dashboard. He looked, already knowing who it was. "Please, can we talk?" Her words sounded like she was pleading, but he didn't feel like responding. What was there to say? What was left to be said? He pressed the phone screen hard, erasing the notification without even opening the message. The silence inside the car seemed deafening, but any noise would be worse. He didn't want to hear anything, he didn't want to think about anything, but his mind gave him no choice. Olivia's face was still etched in his mind, her desperate eyes, her expression of someone who didn't expect that fate. But why did she think it would be different? What did she think would happen? That she would stay with her lover and everything would work out? That you would move on as if nothing had happened? Or worse, that he, Ethan, would be stupid enough to take her in after everything fell apart? Anger grew like a fire inside him. He accelerated the car without the right direction, he needed to get out of there, he needed distance. The world around him passed by like figures, but he barely saw the lights and streets he passed through. His mind was spinning, an uncontrolled storm of thoughts. Then, without realizing it, he was already in front of the house. The sight of that place made his stomach churn. The illuminated facade, the impeccable entrance, everything there was a reminder of what he built, of what he believed to be solid. But now it was just a shattered illusion. He got out of the car and walked to the door, but did not enter. He stood there, staring at the dark wood, feeling the irony of it all. The house was still his, but it was no longer his home. The sound of a car stopping on the street made his heart sink. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The headlights turned off, the car door opened, and the hesitant footsteps approached. He closed his eyes for a moment before turning around. Olivia was there, arms crossed, her eyes red, her face pale. Her expression was a mixture of guilt, fear, and a fragility he had never seen before. But Ethan didn't care. He felt no compassion. No more. "Why did you come?" His voice was dry, cutting. Olivia bit her lip, took a deep breath before responding. Because I couldn't leave it like that. We need to talk, Ethan. To speak. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. You had time to speak. Before you destroyed everything. Now there is nothing left to discuss. She shivered at his tone, but didn't back down. I know I can't change what happened. I know you hate me now, but I never wanted to hurt you like that. He took a step forward, approaching her, his eyes burning with fury. You never wanted to hurt me. You lied to me for months, leave my house to sleep with another man, and then you have the audacity to tell me you never wanted to hurt me? He shook his head, disbelief mixed with contempt. You destroyed everything, Olivia. And for what? For a man who doesn't even want you. For someone who used you and discarded you. She trembled, tears flowing uncontrollably. I was stupid. I know that. But, Ethan. I never stopped loving you. His laugh was harsh, cruel. Love? Do you have the courage to talk about love now? Love is not what you did. Love is not deceiving, lying, treating me like an idiot while throwing yourself into the arms of another. I was weak. She whispered, her voice breaking. I made a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Olivia. He leaned in closer, his voice thick with contempt. It was a choice. She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. Ethan watched the scene, feeling a strange sensation inside him. He always thought that if he were ever betrayed, he would feel crushing pain, a wound that would never heal. But now, looking at her there, broken, vulnerable, he realized something he hadn't expected. It wasn't pain he felt. It was relief. Because now he saw Olivia for who she really was. And he didn't want anything more from her. Go away. He said, firmly. I don't want to see you anymore. She opened her eyes wide in surprise. Ethan, please. Can't we at least try to talk? I can fix this. He took a step back, crossing his arms. You already fixed it. You showed me exactly who you are. And now, I'm free. She sobbed again, but didn't insist. He just nodded, swallowing the pain as if it were bitter poison. She turned slowly, walked to her car and got in, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. Ethan stood there, watching the car's taillights disappear into the dark street. Then he took a deep breath and entered the house. For the first time in a long time, he felt the weight in his chest lift. The betrayal had destroyed their marriage. But in the end, perhaps it would have freed Ethan for something much greater. Ethan stood there, standing in the middle of the room, observing the emptiness around him. The silence in the house seemed deeper than ever, as if every wall absorbed the impact of what had just happened. The weight of betrayal still hung in the air, but something inside him was beginning to change. The anger no longer burned with the same intensity. The disgust, the indignation, everything seemed to be turning into an immense exhaustion, a fatigue that went beyond the physical. He sat on the couch, running his hands over his face, trying to process everything. Olivia was gone, but her presence was still there, permeated in the furniture, in the photos he hadn't yet taken off the shelves, in the scattered objects that, until a few hours ago, seemed part of a solid and unshakable life. But now, all he saw was a collapsed illusion. He closed his eyes, but his mind gave him no respite. The moments with her passed like flashes, from the first days full of passion to the last months, where the distance was palpable, where the betrayal was there, subtle, growing like a shadow that he refused to see. He opened his eyes again, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a stranger in his own house. What would you do now? How would you move forward? The answer seemed obvious, but at the same time frightening. Because moving forward meant accepting that everything you built had come to an end. The cell phone vibrated next to him, breaking the silence. He looked at the screen. Another message from Olivia. He picked up the phone and read the words without any expression. I know I no longer have the right to ask for anything, but please let me explain. Not to win you back, but because I need you to understand. He laughed, a short, dry sound. To understand? What else was there to understand? He already knew everything that mattered. But, against all his expectations, his fingers slid across the screen, and before he could stop himself, he responded. I have nothing more to hear. Accept what you've done and move on. The weight of those words fell on him. Because that was the truth. What was left now was to move forward. But move on to where? He got up and started walking around the house, his footsteps echoing across the cold floor. Every corner told a story, every object was a reminder of the past that I now needed to leave behind. He stopped in front of the bookshelf where old photos were still displayed. Olivia's face at her side, smiling, on trips, parties, moments that now seemed unreal. He picked up one of the frames, looked at the image for a few seconds and, without hesitation, placed it face down. It was time to erase her traces. The next morning, he woke up to light flooding into the room, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't smell her perfume on the pillow next to him. She got up, looked in the mirror and saw a different man. A man who had been betrayed, but was still there. He saw someone who could rebuild, who could find something beyond what was lost. But to do that, he needed to get rid of what was left of her presence. He picked up empty boxes, went through the rooms collecting everything that belonged to Olivia, every outfit, every book, every souvenir. By late afternoon, there was nothing left to carry her touch. The house seemed empty, but for the first time, that absence didn't suffocate him. Days passed, and the routine began to fall into place. The silence in the house, once so deafening, became a necessary peace. He realized that, for the first time in years, he could decide for himself, without needing to measure every step to maintain a marriage that, deep down, was already dead even before Olivia threw him into the abyss. But despite everything, there was something inside him that disturbed him. Something he didn't want to admit. It wasn't just the mourning for the lost marriage, it wasn't just the anger over the betrayal. It was a void. A space within him that, no matter how much I tried to fill it with work, the gym, casual outings with colleagues, was still there. A space that once belonged to the love he once felt for her. He didn't want to accept it, but there was fear in his chest. Fear of never trusting again. Fear of never again finding someone who was real, who didn't lie, who didn't cheat. He wondered if it had been his mistake, if at some point he could have avoided all of this. But the answer always came back to the same conclusion: there was nothing he could have done differently. Olivia chose her path, and now he needed to choose his. It was on an unexpected afternoon that something changed. Ethan was in a cafe, distracted, observing the people around him when he noticed a look on him. A woman sitting a few tables away. Unlike Olivia, her gaze carried no secrets, it didn't seem to hide intentions. It was just a curious look, a discreet interest, without rushing, without games. He looked away for a moment, but then looked back at her. For the first time, he felt a small flash of something new. Something different from the pain and anger he had been carrying. Something that, perhaps, could mean a fresh start. But was he ready? Could he still believe in love after everything? Or had what Olivia done destroyed that part of him forever? He didn't know the answer. But at that moment, looking at that unknown look, he realized that maybe it was time to find out. Ethan looked away from the woman in the cafe and back to the almost untouched cup of coffee in front of him. The idea of a fresh start seemed distant, abstract, like something that belonged to someone else and not him. Was it still too early? Was it still too soon to feel anything other than the scar Olivia had left on him? He found himself wondering if it would ever be possible to trust again, or if every smile, every look, every touch would always be accompanied by a silent doubt, a fear hidden between the words. He rubbed his face with his hands, feeling the weight of everything he had experienced in the last few months. The woman on the other side of the coffee shop was still there. There was no insistence in his gaze, just a discreet curiosity, something that seemed natural. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then turned his attention back to the busy street outside. It wasn't ready. Not now. He took his wallet, left the money on the table and left the cafe without looking back. The cold afternoon wind bit his face, and he walked aimlessly through the streets, trying to collect his thoughts. It was then that his cell phone rang. The name on the screen made his entire body stiffen. Olivia. He could ignore it, he could simply delete that call as he had done with the previous messages. But something inside him compelled him to answer. Maybe it was the need to end everything once and for all. He slid his finger across the screen and brought the phone to his ear. "Why are you calling me?" His voice was firm, but without anger. Just a cold firmness, a wall he erected between them. I needed to talk to you." Her voice was low, hesitant. "I know you don't want to listen to me, but I needed to try. There is nothing more to be said, Olivia. Please, just listen to me." She sighed on the other end of the line, and he heard the muffled sound of her breathing. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I know there's no excuse for what I did. I know I destroyed everything, and there's nothing that can change that. But I wanted you to know that I never wanted it to end like this." Ethan was silent. Her confession no longer had any impact on him. He already knew that. The problem was never the intention. The problem was the choice. You chose, Olivia. You chose to deceive me, you chose to replace me. And now you have to live with the consequences of that. I know. Her voice shook. And I'm living. Ethan, I've never felt so alone. You're right, I threw it all away. And now I see what I lost. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words. But contrary to what he imagined, he felt no pleasure in hearing that. He didn't want Olivia to be in pain. But I also didn't want to be the one to rescue her from this suffering. I can't do anything for you. His voice was firm, but without rancor. Just a reality check. I know. There was silence, and then she murmured, "Have you moved on yet?" The question caught Ethan by surprise. He didn't respond immediately. His first impulse was to say yes, but that would be a lie. It wasn't so simple to move on after something like that. But he knew he was in the way. "I am trying." On the other end of the line, Olivia let out a long sigh. "I hope you can." Ethan pursed his lips, wanting to end the conversation there. "Goodbye, Olivia." She hesitated for a moment, and then, her voice barely audible, she replied, "Goodbye, Ethan." He hung up the phone and stood there, staring at the dark screen. For the first time since everything happened, he felt like some of the weight he had been carrying had lifted. It wasn't a feeling of victory, nor complete relief, but a gradual acceptance. He no longer needed answers, nor justifications. Olivia was part of the past. Days turned into weeks, and over time, Ethan's routine began to fall into place. He started going out more, met old friends, and dedicated himself to himself in a way he hadn't done in years. He discovered new pleasures, things that previously went unnoticed amid the controlled life he led with Olivia. It was during one of these chance encounters that he saw the woman from the cafe again. I hadn't planned on meeting her, but there she was, sitting at a bar, laughing with some friends. This time, she was the one who noticed it first. Her gaze met his, and a brief smile appeared on her lips. A sincere smile, without rushing, without expectations. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and walked towards her. "Hey." His voice came out lighter than he expected. She raised her eyebrows in surprise and smiled. "Hey." And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like maybe the past was finally behind him. Ethan walked next to that unknown woman, feeling the night wind touch his skin in a different way. It wasn't like before, it wasn't like the times when he walked the streets distracted, thinking about what he would do when he got home, what Olivia would be preparing for dinner or what they would watch before bed. Now, each step seemed charged with new meaning, as if he were entering a reality he had never imagined for himself. The past was still there, in some corner of his mind, but no longer like a chain binding him. It was just a memory, a silent warning of what he had endured and what he would never allow to happen again. The woman next to him was talking about something light, casual, and he found himself laughing at an unpretentious comment. It was strange to feel that way again. A sincere laugh, a genuine moment without the shadow of distrust or pain. Maybe this was the beginning of something, or maybe it was just a fleeting moment, but what mattered was that he was there, present, living without the weight of the past crushing his chest. As Ethan continued forward, Olivia sank deeper and deeper into her own abyss. After that connection, after hearing his cold, definitive words, something inside her finally broke. For the first time, she realized the real meaning of everything she had done. It wasn't just about the betrayal, about the moments he spent with another man, but about everything he destroyed in the process. She lost Ethan. Not just as a husband, but as a man, as a companion, as the one who was always by your side. Now, all she was left with was an unbearable emptiness, an absence that echoed in every corner of the new house she had moved into alone. The man Olivia threw her marriage away for didn't even try to contact her. Since he dumped her, there have been no messages, no phone calls. He simply went on with his life, indifferent to what was left of it. And now, without Ethan, without her lover, without anyone by her side, she found herself in front of a mirror that reflected the woman she had become. A woman who destroyed her own happiness for something that was never real. In the days that followed, she tried to find ways to rebuild herself. She tried to convince herself that she could start over on her own, that she didn't need Ethan to be happy. But each attempt was a failure. The world around her seemed to spin at a pace she couldn't keep up with. In casual encounters with former friends, I felt the judgmental gaze of someone who knew what they had done. In the places he frequented before, he felt Ethan's crushing absence, as if every space they had been together was now a cruel reminder of what he had lost. And then came the attempts at rapprochement. First, subtle messages, then desperate attempts at connection. But Ethan never responded. He had closed that door forever, and nothing Olivia did would change that. The pain of rejection became an impossible burden to bear, and she realized she was trapped in a spiral with no way out. One day, while walking around the city aimlessly, he saw Ethan from afar. He was accompanied. She wasn't holding the hand of the woman beside her, but there was something in her eyes, a gleam that Olivia recognized. He was moving on. Without her. And it was at that moment that the truth hit her hard. She became irrelevant to him. There was no more hurt, no more love, just absolute indifference. And that was the worst punishment he could receive. Because in the end, not only did she lose the man who loved her, she lost any meaning in his life. Ethan moved on with his life without looking back. Time passed, and with it, the remnants of the past disappeared. He didn't seek revenge, he didn't want Olivia to suffer. The worst thing that could happen to her had already happened, she had to live with the consequences of her own choices. And now, looking ahead, Ethan knew that no matter what came next, he was finally free. If you've made it this far, comment your opinion on this story. What did you think of the ending? Do you agree with the characters' choices? We want to know your opinion. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories like this. Remember, cheating is never justifiable. Here, we show the real consequences it can bring. Until next time.